Hey folks, Lachlan here. I've been talking about South Africa for roughly a decade now, and doing so causes me to catch a lot of hatred, not only from leftists in my own country, but Western leftists as well. And today I want to talk about the demonic irony of the Western leftist. Let's get some facts out of the way first. I have only ever lived in South Africa. I've never been outside of South Africa's borders, and I have only ever lived in a South Africa which is fully racially integrated, which means that from my earliest childhood, I was raised on equal footing with black children. But to the Western leftist, it would seem that the history of South Africa stopped in 1994 when apartheid was abolished and Nelson Mandela became president. They don't seem to have any desire to know anything further about South Africa than that, which is why when I talk about the situation here as it stands in 2025, they get very angry. One of the reasons for this is that Donald Trump himself, as well as members of his administration, have forced the world, whether they like it or not, to confront the reality of the corruption and incompetence of the African National Congress, who are at this point nothing more than a glorified criminal cartel. And that is undeniable. All you need to do is to look at their actions and how they have betrayed the so called struggle for freedom in order to enrich themselves. And you can see that it's quite clear that the well being of average black people in South Africa is one of the furthest things from their minds. But to the average Western leftist, everything I've just said is a lie simply because Donald Trump has begun to acknowledge the mistreatment of whites and other minorities in this country. When a leftist from another country encounters something I've said in a video or something I've written about South Africa, the range of their reactions generally goes as follows. They will either say nothing and simply mock my post with a laugh react or a dismissive meme, or they will leave a comment either implying that what is happening to South Africa is well deserved, or the boldest among them will straight up tell me that because of what other white people did, I deserve to die. This happens on a fairly regular basis, and many of them are unashamed about it and actually take pride and believe that saying these things and engaging in basically genocidal evil somehow makes them virtuous. It's ironic because something that leftists also like to say is that I'm simply an ignorant racist, and that if I would only educate myself, then I would understand the true history of South Africa, which kind of makes me laugh because at this point, I don't even get angry at these people because I don't fundamentally see them as people anymore. I do see them in practice as demons because imagine how evil and, quite frankly, socially retarded you have to be to think you can tell someone who has lived in a country his entire life that in order to understand the country in which he lives, he should read a book rather than relying on the evidence of his own personal experience, professionally and otherwise. These people are willfully blind to the facts of the South African situation, while claiming to care about the oppression of black people. But really, it's got nothing to do with ending oppression, particularly among white leftists. What they are doing is projecting hatred for themselves and their own cultures onto me because I am somebody who does not apologize for being white, who does not accept personal responsibility for apartheid because I was a baby when it ended, and who will not apologize for the actions of other people simply because they share my skin tone. But leftists, particularly those who have been well programmed by propaganda in Western universities, can't see beyond the rhetoric and the essentially the lies that they've been programmed with. Because to do that would require them to assume the responsibility of thinking critically and thinking for themselves. Many will never choose to do this because it is psychologically uncomfortable to accept that kind of responsibility. And they find a great deal of comfort and acceptance in remaining within their ideological in group because they get to act as though they are virtuous for believing every narrative fed to them by institutional power structures and corporate media, rather than looking at the reality of the world as it actually exists. Because that's the fundamental difference between a hardcore leftist and somebody who's just moderate. You don't even have to be on the right or extremely right wing. Hardcore leftists exist almost entirely in a world of abstraction. They do not they do not engage with reality and in fact become very emotionally disturbed when reality intrudes upon the narrative that they have chosen to live within. This is why they will repeatedly scream words like racist, fascist, bigot, and any number of other meaningless cliches at me as if they were magic spells which have the power to immediately silence me simply because they've been said. But if anything, every time they do this, the potency of their words is decreased. And I actually quite appreciate it when I am insulted for talking about South Africa and for raising these issues because the insults are useful. They are windows of insight into how the leftist mind works, or more accurately, how the leftist mind doesn't work because it has been centrally programmed by someone else. Leftists, by and large, and I do not use the term leftist as just a shallow insult. I'm talking about people who willingly self identify as such. But yes, leftists generally do not think for themselves. They never develop the capacity to do so, and when they are challenged to try, they become irrational, angry, hostile, and sometimes even violent. And it is very useful when the leftists who lack any kind of self awareness openly display these qualities because it shows any reasonable or sane person, regardless of their political persuasion, just how crazy the political left has become. I think that's just about everything I have to say on the topic for today. As always, I hope that you found something of value in this content. Look after yourselves, be kind to one another, question all narratives, and for now, farewell.